Excellent. So my first caveat is that I've been speaking for 3 days solid at expos. So if my voice peters off by the end of this, that'll be my reason why. So good morning, everybody. My name's Simon Cuthbert. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for it's now actually 33 years last week we worked out, which is kind of impressive, but also quite sad at the same time that I've been around. I've worked for, I've spent the majority of my career working with the kind of leading edge technology providers of the time. Really interested always to work with technology companies that have got a new and innovative way of doing things. The likes of Content Technologies, who were the first real email detection company, and they had Mail Sweeper and Web Sweeper. If you go back that far, through to Baltimore Technologies and ClearSmith with PKI, Varonis with access the first real access rights management and file detection solution, through to AAP networks with email encryption. Um, some years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, I decided that, or people decided for me that I was actually quite unemployable because I was a bit of a disruptor within organizations. So I took the leap to create VAR Channels, which is a company that helps organizations generally not UK based enter the UK market. And that has sprung out some other business lines for me as well. So I was part of a GDPR working group looking at Articles 5, 33, and 34 around data loss prevention and how GDPR was actually workable in the real life. So a whole bunch of technology people and lawyers would write the articles, and then I'd be part of a working group that would actually say this is actually something that is workable in the real life. And there was a lot of conversations backwards, forwards on that. I'm a cross-parliamentary advisor on cybersecurity. I spend a day a month in the Houses of Parliament with a cross-parliamentary group looking at the latest threats of the day. Not all of that is cyber. Some of that we've spent a lot of time talking around Ukraine and Russia and other things as well. I'm a speaker on the circuit. I've been doing this for a long time. My marketing manager told me I had to put a thing about an award that we got last year. She tells me to do all these sorts of things. So just to go through where we're at in terms of what we're going to talk about today. So in this session, we're going to talk about insider threats. Now, I come at this from a business perspective. I kind of raise my flag very quickly and say I am not a technologist. I famously can't wire a plug. So I don't look at this from a technology standpoint. I talk to board levels, senior leadership teams, and help them to understand the threats that are out there and how best to mitigate them. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about this morning. Um, Hopefully we can take away some euros. We're all experts on here. We're all professionals in our field and around cybersecurity. So some of the areas I may be teaching you to suck eggs. If I am, I apologize. But if I can give you one or two snippets to take away, then my job's done this morning. So what is the definition of an insider threat? So an insider threat is it's most simply defined as a security threat that originates from inside the organization, and it has a very wide scope uh, to define that. Give me just 1 second. Something has gone very odd with my screen. Give me a second. Okay. Can you see my screen still?
Yeah, you're all clear.
Excellent. Yeah, sorry, my screen went blank for a second, so that was a bit strange. Anyway, so insider threats can be intentional, unintentional. It's a term that can refer to any individuals who gain access inside an organization, generally to information that they can have access to and want to do something or accidentally do something they shouldn't do, but also access to data that they shouldn't really have access to. And you can create a breach accidentally. And we'll come on to that in more in more depth a little bit later. It doesn't have to be a present or present employee or stakeholder within the business. It can be a former employee or anyone that still has access to the organization's data. And I'm sure we've all experienced throughout our careers at some point where we've left an organization, but we still have access to our files and folders for a period of time. And some unscrupulous people can take advantage of that, and some do. You've also got contractors, business associates. One that really interests me are the third-party supply chain, and Akim touched on that earlier, I believe. The third-party supply chain to access information within an organization is something that's always interesting as well. Um, and the insider threat terminology, as I say, is very broad. Most threats are avoidable, but unfortunately, they're not. They're not dealt with, and again, we'll come at this from a kind of a business level as well. So, why is your data at risk of a breach? Well, when it comes to data security, the risk of a breach often comes down to one thing: complexity. I see this a lot. It's either too complex or not complex enough, and it's a really fine balancing act. Many organizations unknowingly leave themselves exposed because of the way that their systems and access controls have evolved over time, and it gets to the point where it grows and grows and grows, and they feel it's too difficult to untie all of that. Um, if you look at excessive or legacy permissions, which is a great one to start with, old access rights that linger off longer than they often need to. People move roles, they change departments, or even they leave the company, but their access sticks around, creating unnecessary exposure to that data. Then you have complicated folder structures. Layer upon layer of nested folders make it incredibly difficult to manage who can access what. And it's very, very easy to lose track, and even easier for sensitive data to be left exposed. And then you've got IT who doesn't know who should have access. Now, IT teams are typically the gatekeepers, but they're not the data owners. And you may or may not be surprised to understand how many organizations don't understand that themselves. They don't understand who actually owns the data. Um, the data owner generally should be the head of that department. So the data owner is the head of for finance is the head of finance. The data owner for development is the head of development and the CTO of the organization. It's the senior managers, the leaders within those departments that are technically the data owners. And IT, they don't know who actually needs access. And with most organizations still with the limited time and resources, they're just trying to keep the lights on. I have a lot of empathy for IT organizations within the businesses that I deal with on a consultative basis because they're running around trying to keep servers going and then they're asked to reset a password and do lots of mundane roles within IT that actually should be business processes. So we'll come on to that in a little bit. Lack of visibility. Many organizations simply don't have a clear view of who has access to what. And without that visibility, identifying the risk is nigh on impossible. Um, and one that this is where I make my bread and butter is that the board just isn't paying attention. If leadership doesn't see data access as a priority, it rarely gets the attention and more importantly the investment that it needs. And that leaves gaps. And what do hackers and threat vectors from outside love? They love gaps because that's where they can get their ins. Um, so, a couple of comments that I've had is, it's the board don't see it as a priority and it's all a bit complicated. That's one of the very common phrases that I hear when I do board presentations is that the access rights and insider threats and how you control it, it's all complicated. And yeah, it is all a bit complicated, but that complexity is exactly what the attackers will exploit. Simplifying access, improving visibility, and making data ownership a shared responsibility is the first step towards making giving you better security. So let's do the bit that scares most of the senior leadership teams and boards when I go and talk to them. If we talk about the numbers themselves in 2024. So last year in 2024, the average cost of a data breach was about 4.88 million, and that's a 10% increase on 2023. And this is due to a number of factors: increased frequency of attacks, so data breaches are becoming more common, increased sophistication, and it's something that Akim talked about earlier. The sophistication of breaches is increasing significantly. They're becoming more complex. They're becoming longer burns within organizations as well. So you'll have a piece of malicious code sitting there for quite a long period of time after it's been exposed, generally by an employee inside the organization. The increased costs, the data breaches are becoming more expensive to fix. And then when you start looking at hybrid cloud environments, these are going to be more expensive because you've got to protect the complexity of managing multiple environments. And a big one, and I think that it's a common theme across the board, is that the shortage of cybersecurity skills in the marketplace at the moment in the UK. It's worsened over the last year, and it's leading to increased remediation costs. I've got to the point with a couple of my clients that are looking for, pre-sales engineers, first, second line support guys, where we've actually got a relationship with a couple of universities. So the Technical University in Reading, I've got a meeting with them straight after this to talk about how we can introduce some of their students into the business to build them from the ground up, because the cybersecurity skills shortage in the marketplace is getting quite serious in the UK, and those that are available are getting quite expensive as well, and that's another consideration. Some of the other data statistics to look at for last year: the average cost per record for a breach was $165. The average cost of what we call a mega breach, which is 50 to 60 million records, was around 375 million. The average cost of a data breach with a life cycle of over 200 days was 5.46 million. 51% of costs are incurred within the first year following that breach. And a lot of organizations can be significantly impacted from a negative standpoint because of that. And organizations with a high level of non-compliance are showing an average cost of 5.5 million. And it's nice to see in the UK that the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, is actually starting to get some teeth and put some fines in place and show that they're not afraid to put those fines and name and shame those organizations that are causing those breaches. So if we look at the impacts, just a very quick one on here. The Ponemon Institute's 2022 Global Insider Threat Report highlighted a 65% increase in the cost of credential theft, which went from 2.19 million in 2020 up to 3.6 million in 2022. Mimecast's 2024 Annual Data Exposure Report noted that the average cost of an insider incident reached $15 million, with a 28% increase in insider-driven events since 2021. Ponemon also said that the time to contain an insider threat increased from 77 days to 85 days. And that's because they are becoming more complex, which again refers back to a bit of what Akin was talking about in the complexity of these things. And incidents taking over 90 days cost organizations on average $13.5 million annually. So these numbers are not insignificant. And I should also add that I'm not talking about the HSBCs and the GlaxoSmithKlines and British Airways of this world. The vast majority of breaches occur in that small to medium business space. And the reason for that being is that they just don't have the solutions in place. They don't have the experience, they don't have the time or the manpower to be able to protect themselves. And that is where we're seeing a lot of the challenges becoming. The large corporates, yes, they're getting attacked every day, but they've got very large systems and very experienced people and lots of people to help contain those threats. And that's where we're seeing the vast majority of breaches occurring, from that small to medium business up to kind of 5,000 users within an organization. Then you've got the fun regulatory perspectives on data breaches that are caused by insider threats, and they focus on protecting sensitive data and personally identifiable information. PCI information, PDI, things like that. You've got good old GDPR. GDPR applies to organizations processing personal data of individuals within the European Union and further afield. And that includes the UK under Data Protection Act of 2018. And you've got the insider threat implications of that, where organizations must ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of personal data. Insider threats, such as the misuse of access or negligence, can constitute a violation of GDPR. My wife works for a charity, and she received an email that had the email address of every employee within and volunteer within that charity on the to field. That in itself is a breach, because they weren't all business email addresses; they were personal email addresses as well. And that organization as well, yesterday or the day before, decided it was a good idea to give the personal cell numbers of every employee of the organization that was receiving a new laptop to DHL, to enable them to give them a delivery time and give them delivery updates of the laptop that was coming. Without without permission of doing that, that's a GDPR breach. It's very small things, but they all add up. Um, you got the UK Data Protection Act 2018, which kind of falls in line with GDPR. Then you get the fun ones like the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. They focus on protecting client data, operational risk, and maintaining system integrity. And then the National Cybersecurity Centre that I spent a lot of time with. They kind of give an umbrella overview. They don't particularly have any teeth, but they're very good at giving advice, which is very important, especially for that SME market that don't really know where to get that advice from. The NCSC are very good at that. There are a whole bunch of regulatory things that I could go through. I could spend probably an hour on that, but I won't. I'll move forward. But there are. The point of this is that from a business perspective, there is so much that organizations have to adhere to, and it's a lot of work, and it astonishes me that organizations don't take security more seriously. As I say, I'm seeing some of the same threats that I saw 30 years ago still being talked about today in exactly the same way. They're just getting more sophisticated. So let's look at some of the preventative measures that we can put in place to mitigate the risks of the insider breaches. Organizations should implement a combination of technical, administrative, and behavioral measures. And I'm talking about the human element of the insider threats. So one of the things I talked about just now was access control and management. So implement a role-based access controls to limit access to employees who need it for their job function. Use the principle of least privilege to minimize unnecessary access to sensitive data, which essentially is give access to people that they need access to that data at that time for that period of time to perform their role. Regular reviews and updates of user access permissions, especially after role changes within an organization or terminations, are very important. Um, Make sure an organization enforces multi-factor authentication for accessing specifically sensitive information systems and data. And that's very important for when the users are working remotely, which is, as we know, is a very common thing post-COVID, that we have a very strong hybrid model in the UK. Let's make sure that a laptop hasn't been stolen and people are trying to get access to it. Just very simple things like that. Monitoring and logging is very important. Deploy real-time monitoring tools to detect unusual behavior within an organization, such as why is that person accessing this large volume of data when they've never accessed it before? Make sure you have alerts for that. Maintain comprehensive audit logs of users' activities, such as files access, downloads, email communications, making sure that they're not sending information out of an organization that they shouldn't be. But more importantly, they're not clicking on something when an email comes in that's been missed by the email gateway. They're not clicking on a link that is going to do something nefarious within the organization. Data protection and encryption. Make sure you encrypt sensitive data. A lot of organizations still don't encrypt their data. They think it's too expensive, too much hard work. There's lots of solutions out there these days that are much, much better at it, both for data at rest, but also data in transit. So data that's been sent via email or other things. Don't ever let your users within organizations use things like WeTransfer. I can guarantee you that gets scanned by the Chinese government, and Dropbox tell me that there are 8 petabytes of sensitive data sitting on just their UK servers because people will load it up there, send the link to say it's there, and because we're very task-based within our roles within work, we've done that task, we move on to something else and forget to take it down in most instances. So making sure that we all understand the importance of where that sensitive data and data itself is resting is very important. One that is very dear to my heart is employee training and awareness, making sure that there is a campaign within the organization to continually educate employees, continually make them aware of what they need to be doing, what they need to be adhering to. And most of you will probably be thinking the 1 hour a year that the employees within your organizations do your security awareness training. Um, Again, human psyche tells us that when we are forced to do something like security awareness training, we will do what we can do to get through it as quickly as possible. And then 5 minutes later, we've forgotten over 90% of what we've learned in that process because our brains are telling us that we don't actually need that. We don't want to learn that. And we move on to something else. We've seen instances where employees have done and put their security awareness training, and less than 5 minutes later, they were sent a fake email from the IT team, and they opened the attachment, and it would have been something that could have caused a virus to get into the organization. The simulated phishing exercise is always very important to reinforce employee vigilance. And it's not about beating employees with a stick. It's making them aware, educating them, but educating them in a way that is not like you're beating them with a stick. You've got to use the whole carrot approach. Make sure with policies and procedures that you develop and enforce a clear insider threat policy, which is outlining acceptable behavior, data access protocols, and consequences for violations for employees. Implement a data classification framework to identify and protect sensitive information, and establish a secure communications channel for sharing sensitive information, both inside and outside the organization with customers and third-party companies that you work with. Something that a lot of organizations don't do properly is pre-employment screening. Make sure that you conduct a thorough background check during the hiring process to identify potential risks. There are, because people are hiring from abroad, and they're hiring remote teams and remote organizations, they don't really do the full background check and do the checks and balances of third-party companies that they're bringing in and also employees as well. Make sure you've got an insider threat program that you can dedicate and to educate the threat management teams and oversee and respond to insider threats. Regularly assess and improve your insider threat detection response and capabilities. It's an ongoing process. Threats are always changing. The key to this though is humans. It's humans that are the key to this. Your employees and your third party organizations. It comes down to making sure they know where they should be looking out for threats. Just don't just assume that IT have taken care of it. Then you've got technology safeguards such as privileged access management tools to monitor the control of administrative accounts. Implement application whitelisting to restrict the use of unauthorized software and tools that employees. Now, I'm not talking specifically about developers because, as we agreed in Akim's presentation, developers want the freedom and the ability to access and download particular tools. That same rule doesn't apply to employees within the organization that work in sales or finance or marketing or administration. And then always look at your third party vendor contracts and understand what their SLAs are, understand what safeguards they're putting in place, and make sure you've got a very robust instant response planning process as well. Uh, really, in conclusion, and I'm sure I've got some questions coming my way, but I've tried to whiz through this as quickly as possible. This is actually a presentation that we take 2 days to present to boards in quite a lot of detail. As technologies evolve, make sure that you are aware of the threats that evolve around them, and make the necessary updates within your organization. The insider threat will account for over 75% of the data breaches within your organization. And a lot of organizations don't like to admit that. They also, I wrote a piece recently actually that went out around the balance between security and the Security Balancing Act, between allowing your employees the freedom to do what they want without being overlooked and monitored too much as well. And I can send you a copy of that as well. Make sure that your organization is training and making your employees aware of the threats at all times. The one final thought I'll leave you with, it's when it comes to security and threats, I always remember and always refer back to Donald Rumsfeld. I just think it's one of the greatest statements ever made in terms of the knowing the unknowns. I won't read it out. It's there for you to read. I'm sure you're all aware of it. But you can only fix what you can see. You only know what you know, and you also don't know what you don't know, which I think is great. Education is absolutely key from a end user perspective. Making sure that they're educated, but they're not forced to do it, or it's applied in a way that isn't forcing them to do it, because human nature, human psyche is, if you're trying to make us do it, we're not going to do it, or we'll put the least amount of effort in to do it and then move on to something else, and our brains won't acknowledge that. Thank you very much for your time. I have whisked through this as quickly as I can because I know I've only got 30 minutes, but if you have any questions, please do let me know.